All right, man. This is episode number 81 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded just in the nick of time on Monday, October 16th, 2023 at 7:07 p.m. I believe this is the first time I've recorded this at night. It has been quite a busy weekend, and sometimes it can be very troubling to try to find a half hour of time to not only discuss these films and pieces of art that I would like to talk about, but also do so in a way where I am focused and I am not distracted by any kind of menial nonsense or feel I'll be interrupted, which is sometimes the case. So it's tricky finding those pockets of time, but we must, or else we will never get what we need to get done, and that goes for anything that we wish to pursue. Specifically in this case, finding the appropriate time for watching, for writing, and for reading at certain points of the day when we feel we will be the most productive at those. You don't want to try to get your best writing done if you haven't had any sleep for 2 days, because your brain's going to be racking thinking of a bunch of other stuff. And if you're dead tired, you probably don't want to be reading anything. If you're, feeling creative and focused, probably don't want to watch something. You probably want to get back onto your output that you can do. But of course, that is all subjective, and we each have our own routines, our own cycles that will benefit us in the short and the long run. So, throat's a little dry, so I apologize if there's a couple pauses here and there. I just want to get a sip of this water, and we will talk about films. There's been a lot going on in the past few days. I was actually just looking earlier at the newest Criterion announcements, and there are some quite good ones. I gotta say, I think most of them I'm really on board with. And let's see, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. There was the Chantal Akerman box set that's coming. Yeah, I've only seen two of her films, and I don't remember the name of one of them. I'm sorry, Chantal Akerman. For some reason, it was giving me something else. But the one that I always blank on the name of is Je tu il elle, which is I, you, he, she. And the other film of hers that I have seen, but I do not remember the name of. And I'm not even going to try to find it right now because she has quite a bit of films under her belt. But it was one that I liked a lot. I believe actually it was The Meetings of Anna. Yes, that is the one. Found in just the nick of time from 1978, which is also a very good film. But that's coming. 4Ks of Trainspotting is coming. That's fantastic. That's one of my favorite films. I think it's Danny Boyle's strongest non-American film. I kind of tend to go back and forth between Trainspotting and 127 Hours as being my favorites of his work. Two very different kinds of films, but one's a Scottish film, one's an American film, so it's easy to differentiate that in terms of how I'd like to put those side by side. But Blood Simple is getting a 4K upgrade. There was the other one. I should have just pulled up the list here, but I didn't. Lone Star from John Sayles is getting a 4K, man. Now that is very cool because a little while ago I had talked about how I just finished watching all of John Sayles' directed films, and I've moved on since to watching the work of Vittorio De Sica, and as well from them the Apu trilogy, which I speculated last year would get 4Ks as well, because I had seen new 4K restorations theatrically of Satyajit Ray's brilliant trilogy of Pather Panchali, Aparajito, and Apur Sansar. Just three brilliant films, man. I love all three of these films. It was such a joy to, there we go. I forgot to silence my telephone. But I saw these over the course of 3 weeks. It was such a joyous time because it was the Pather Panchali was on one Wednesday, the next Wednesday was a Parajito, and the Wednesday after that was a Pur Sansar, and just brilliant brilliant films. If you haven't already seen these films, hey, there you go. I'll definitely be picking up this box set. I don't already have the previous Blu-ray box set. Speaking of, actually, before I get into the next bit, I guess I thought it'd be fun to kind of mention my rankings of John Sayles' directed films. Thankfully, he's a filmmaker who he's done 18 directed films, and there's only one I don't, well, maybe not don't like. There's really only one that I'm the most ambivalent on. Maybe actually two, but when he's really at it, man, he's really at it. So if you're curious about my directed, and of course, he's done he's written like The Howling and Alligator, which is a great film. But my rankings of his directed films from my least favorite to my favorite of his work is my least favorite is Casa de los Babies, then The Secret of Roan Inish, then Silver City, then Passion Fish, then Honey Dripper, then Amigo, then Go for Sisters, then The Return of the Secaucus Seven, then Eight Men Out, then Liana, then Limbo, then Sunshine State, then Men with Guns, then Lone Star, then Matewan, then City of Hope, then The Brother from Another Planet, and then my favorite of his work is Baby It's You. And of all those films, I would say that City of Hope and Men with Guns were the two that I was just really the most surprised at in terms of I knew Lone Star had sort of a reputation and had been a critical favorite and a fan favorite, but City of Hope and Men with Guns were two of his works that I really hadn't heard much about, and were such great films, especially City of Hope, but Men with Guns as well has such an interesting tone and mood of just kind of riding the surface of potentially leaning into darker territory, but it never quite goes there. I mean, it does, but it never dwells on it, I should say. It's got almost a relaxed sort of feeling, and, you start to notice a pattern with a lot of his films. He films a lot with a lot of Spanish-speaking actors, and he has a lot of, like, minorities and women in the leads and stuff. He's just a really, really fantastic filmmaker, and now with Lone Star getting a 4K, that'll give people an opportunity to see it. And also, Matewan is on the Criterion collection as well, so hopefully we can get some of his other titles on there. Because even his newer films, I think are all actually pretty good. Go for Sisters, Amigo, and Honey Dripper of the last 10 or 15 years. Because Honey Dripper was 2007, Amigo was 2010, and then Go for Sisters was 2013. And that has now been 10 years since his final film, but solid announcements overall today. It was very good to hear. Some months you have labels who have stronger months than others, and today was definitely for sure one of Criterion's strongest. So 2024 is already looking to shape up fairly well. Officially full on in the 1993 watches. That top 10 will be coming at the beginning of November, so officially in 1993 mode. I'm only watching 1993 films from here to the end of the month and then getting that episode up, but there's so many films to be watched in such a short amount of time that it's just not going to be able to get to it all. Maybe if I give myself 6 months or a year, I could get through every single one that I wanted to, but for the sake of time and for the sake of other films I need to be watched, it's just not going to happen. But still, just plenty of great ones that I have to be watched that I know will definitely be on the list for sure. That's part of the fun of doing all of these is getting the opportunity to rewatch a lot of films that I hadn't seen in a while, but also watching big films of a certain year that I hadn't seen previously. So it gives me an opportunity to check off a lot of these films that I would have liked to have seen otherwise, but just hadn't had the opportunity to get to. And that's going to happen. There's plenty of films that we're going to, you're gonna die, and there's so many films that you're not gonna have seen. There's so many books you're not gonna have read, but we get through it in the time that we have. So, if you're talking to someone and you say, "Have you seen this film? You've seen this film?" and they say, "No," don't be like, "Oh, you got to see this film." It's like, my man, there's probably 100 films they've seen that you have, and they can say the same thing on. It's just we have only X amount of time in this life to do what we want to do with it, but it's important not to waste it. It's important not to find ourselves in situations where we do not want to be there and find ourselves socializing with nonsense conversation, putting ourselves in situations that you're wondering how that time could be better allotted. It's like it's one thing to get the job done. It's another thing to talk about getting the job done and then wonder why there's been no progress on it. It's you don't want to be on your deathbed. You don't want to be on your final day. Thinking back to I should have done this. I should have done that. It's like now's the time to do it, man. No one's gonna wait for you. You can always, you can always get more money. That's not a problem. You can get more money, whatever it is, but you can't get more time. So you gotta work on that the best way that you can. But speaking of when I was talking about the Apu trilogy of theatrical films, I should say releases of films, I had the pleasure of seeing what year is it? 2001, I believe, or 2000. The brilliant from one of my favorite filmmakers, Bela Tarr, and also co-directed by Agnes, what's her last name? Horanitsky. From 2000 is Werckmeister Harmonies. This is on a new 4K restoration featuring a couple actors who you'll see in some of Bela Tarr's other work. Most notably, I believe it was Janos Dirzi, who I think showed up in the Turin Horse. And I believe he did. He's been in quite a number of films. And let me just double check if he was actually in the Turin Horse, because it's a very small cast, only 2 or 3 people in there. Actually, maybe like 4 or 5. If I could just find it here, but maybe not. Try not to have too much silence here. Yes, he was in the Turin Horse, along with the woman in the film, her name being Erica Bach, B-O-K. If you've seen Satan Tango, she is the young girl in there who has a whole chapter of the film devoted to her. She's only been in 3 films, Satan Tango, another Bela Tarr film, The Man from London, 2007, with Tilda Swinton, and then The Turin Horse from 2011. And that is his current last film. Let me double check that last feature film that he's done, to my knowledge, but I might be wrong about that. And there was a documentary that I saw that was on Mubi that I will definitely watch, which is Tarr, Bela. I used to be a filmmaker. Will definitely be watched at some point, for sure. Let me just double check to make sure about... I think he's done some shorts since, but I didn't know he was an executive producer on Lamb. That's very interesting. I wonder how much he actually was involved with that film. But yeah, he did a short in 2017 called Muhammad, and then he did a film in 2019 called Missing People, which is a documentary in a work of site-specific expanded cinema going beyond his earlier narrative features. The director presents a middle and upper-class audience gathered in a museum setting with images of real homeless people from their wealthy city of Vienna who are shown consuming food and participating in various vignettes. Very cool. Yes, but, last year I did talk about doing a video at the end of the year that was 10 discoveries or first-time watches, because I don't really like to... I really like to differentiate between the two, because there's films I discover every year that I'm just like, wow, I'm completely just like so engulfed in it and blown away by, the films earlier this year, like Something Anything was like one of the first things I watched this year. I'd never even heard of before this year, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. But those other films, like Being There, which I've known about, the Monty Hellman film, or I'm sorry, the Hal Ashby film, that I've known about. I just hadn't seen until fairly recently. That's been one of the best things I've seen this year. So I wanted to make sure to do that at the end of the year, to just do, because I love those kinds of lists. I love those kind of videos and podcasts. Great way to discover new stuff, but I also want to just mention some of these films that I'm closing in on almost 1,000 films watched this year. I have about maybe another 100, 120 or so, which will be done in no time. So of 1,000, you're only going to get 1% of that. I guess that's not including. I guess that's including rewatches. So maybe give or take a little bit less, a little bit more. Who knows? But with this film, Werckmeister Harmonies, which will definitely be. Unless I just see just other better films, repeatedly. This will be mentioned. This will be talked about at the end of the year. But this is, a film like this is a film that needs to be seen theatrically. I think all of Bela Tarr's films need to be seen theatrically. I've only seen Werckmeister Harmonies, The Turin Horse, and Satan Tango, but all of them are so similar in atmosphere, in directing, in dialogue. I think of the 3, this has the most dialogue, with The Turin Horse having the least amount of dialogue, and this I would say this probably has more than Satan Tango. considerable since Satan Tango is 7.5 hours, whereas this is 2.5 hours. I think this is a little more focused on something closer to a narrative of this town, that once there's this arrival of this guy with a giant kind of truck with some stuff inside that I think is best kind of left discovered when you watch the film, and sort of what happens to this town. His work, I found, is heavier on atmosphere and heavier on mood than it is a clear, concrete narrative. I think the atmosphere, the feeling of something almost apocalyptic, so these places where he films, I don't know exactly. I think he's Hungarian. I'm not exactly sure about that. He, I wish I could find an easier way to find some of this information. So yes, he was born in, I'm not going to try to say PECS, Hungary, but his work just, it feels otherworldly. It feels so isolated from the rest of the world, like it doesn't even take place in our reality. It's sort of like when you see these people, they feel like a world of their own, where they go about their lives in a certain way. There's not a lot of open, far away exteriors. It's very foggy, and a lot of the interiors are very run down. These characters kind of get together at the pub. These kind of get just completely drunk and just hang out with each other. There's the whole beginning sequence of the film when you have this character Janos, played by Lars Rudolph, or Janos, I don't know how to say his name, and he is constructing this sort of orbit around these characters, and just the way it's all done in these very hypnotic long takes. These are the kinds of films that need to be seen theatrically, because it's very, at home it can be tricky. You're distracted by so many things, by noises outside, by the noise in the house. Maybe you're with your parents or roommates or lovers or whatever it is, friends, and all that stuff. And it's easy to get pulled out of the film and distracted. But when you're in the cinema, I mean, unless you gotta, take a piss or something like that, you're in the cinema, man. You're in this film, so you're completely engrossed, especially with some of the beautiful photography in this film. Just gorgeous, stunning shots. There's one shot in particular that was just completely brilliant, the way it illuminated the audience. When you just have a character walking and he's only in a part of the screen, and the entire rest of the screen is covered in just blackness. It just sort of paints the audience in black. It's just a gorgeous sight that when I left the cinema and it was nighttime, it was just like, wow, I feel like I just got out of a vortex of something otherworldly, of something ethereal that you can't be put your finger on. And his work is going to be for a certain kind of audience. If you're looking for spectacle, if you're looking for something closer to traditional film, you're not going to get that here. I think of his work in comparison, more so in mood and more so in atmosphere. I guess probably more so mood than atmosphere, with another filmmaker who I've grown quite fond of, which is a picked upon Pharmaceutical, who I've only seen 2 of his films, so I can't totally say for sure. Actually, speaking of Tilda Swinton, you have Memoria, she's in that, and then she's in The Man from London with Bela Tarr. And actually, I talked about her last week on Pedro Almodovar's new short, The Human Voice, so it's great to see her pop up. Then here and there, she's one of the best actors working. And yeah, but it's a film that you gotta really be with, man, because if you're not gonna be with this sort of feeling, that like long takes with not a lot of dialogue in them, you're feeling the time on a lot of these shots. When characters go to walk somewhere, you're gonna follow them on the journey. The film is not interested in keeping you up to pace. It's sort of just you are stuck here with these characters. Much in the same way of something like Satan Tango. When you see a character who has to go to a building in the distance, we're going to follow them to that distance. And I think that's one of the things that is so brilliant about that film, is that because that film uses time to its advantage, it is not in a rush, but creates an atmosphere and a dreariness and a dread that really few films I can think of can replicate it, specifically in that matter of just you're here, you're in it with these characters, and we're not concerned about wrapping this up anytime soon. But on top of that, it's just also brilliant filmmaking. The way that we follow certain characters, this film has Janos, the closest thing to a main character, but the lives of the people that he involved himself with. And following some of the other townspeople, there's like one great shot where he goes off screen, and we just see a policeman and his lover, wife, girlfriend, whomever, gets on his lap, and they have a very what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very, not even a sloppy kiss, but it's very like uncoordinated kiss, and it goes on, and you wonder, why does it linger on this shot? And it's terrific, man. We get ourselves involved with the townspeople and their quirks, and when it leads to a destructive end, we really buy into it, man. There's some great tracking shots, great long sequences. There's one in a hospital that's very well done, that you just watch, imagining the coordination of it all, of just how, if one actor or one thing goes out of place, or someone runs into the camera, or the boom mic gets in the shot, you got to put it all back and set it all back up. And it's so earned in a way that when you're watching the film and you get behind what it is going for in terms of mood, which I know I keep saying that word a lot, that you don't even realize at a certain point. You're like a fly on the wall, or really just in the situation. It's brilliant stuff, man. This is one of the best things I've seen this year. I'm glad that I almost watched this a few months ago. It was available on YouTube. I don't know what the quality was on it, and it's not ideal, but this doesn't have a home video release in America, I don't even believe. Or if it is, it's out of print. There's no, though the DVD of this is out of print overseas. So I'm hoping that with this 4K restoration, that a company like Arbalos or someone who put out Satan Tango will put this out. They also put out Damnation, which is a film of his I haven't seen yet, but I'm very eager to. I don't know if the Turin Horse has a Blu-ray or not, but I imagine so. But his films, I can't get behind his work enough. This is totally my kind of film. Very slow, moody, haunting films that you really you're not going to watch it 10 times, but you're going to never forget a film like this. This is a completely brilliant film, man. Again, this is one of the best things I've seen this year. And I love this film, man. Werckmeister Harmonies. Funny enough, actually, I was talking about last time with Peckinpah. I was reading through that Sam Peckinpah book, and I'm still on it, man. Almost done. We're in the third act of the book. Just got a whole discussion about Straw Dogs. We're in the production of Straw Dogs right now, and I might try to find that section, but there's one section I wanted to read where the author brilliantly shoots down sort of the critical analysis of the film at the time being very misunderstood, and even if Peckinpah tends to contradict himself in terms of the message of the film, in terms of interviews, not in the film itself, what the author pulls from it is something very stark and very just incredibly well written. But I mentioned that because only, I think a day or two, maybe 3 after I recorded that episode, I did end up watching Pat Garrett versus Billy the Kid, which I recorded off TCM, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So now that leaves me only with Cross of Iron, Osterman Weekend, and the name, which I'm blanking on right now, that was done before Ride the High Country, and I will have seen his whole filmography, and this is one of the best things I've read this year. And let me see if I can actually, I'm not going to pause it. I did this last time, and I probably should have got the book beforehand, but I didn't. And I won't have to go back too far, because the page that I'm on, actually, everybody wants to message me when I'm recording. I'll have to look at that after. Let's see if I can find the section I was on. It had a really solid breakdown, and I don't want to spoil it for you guys, because if you haven't seen Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman and Susan George, he's probably my second favorite of his work. This would be behind The Wild Bunch. I think Straw Dogs is a masterpiece of a film. But I may not be able to find it at this point. I should have written that down before, but that is my fault there. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find this. Well, this is one of them. Maybe I'll talk about. I want to make sure there's no spoilers in this. I might have to just give up on that because I don't want to look at this forever and try to find it. I may not be able to find it, so I might have to just abandon that mention right there. And actually, speaking of Criterion from before, that also has a Criterion. So, with November coming up, if you haven't seen that film and you wish to do so, you can get that for $20 on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you want to purchase your Criterions from. Also on their website, of course. Yeah, I found one section I'd like to mention, but I don't want to spoil the film. Here we go. Actually, here's one section that I can talk about here. I really like how this is written. Listen to this. I'm quoting off of page 401. Where is it? There it is. When the finished film hit theaters more than a year later, many critics would attack it as a fascist celebration of the joys of combat. Just as many would defend it as an anti-violence statement that cautioned us against our own innate savagery. Peckinpah himself switched from the first interpretation to the second from one interview to the next. Sometimes he seemed to embrace both interpretations in the same interview, even in the same breath. He told William Murray of Playboy, David Sumner, Dustin Hoffman's character in the film, he didn't know who he was and what he was all about. We all intellectualize about why we should do things, but it's our purely animal instincts that are driving us to do them all the time. David found out he had all those instincts and made him sick unto death, and at the same time he had guts enough to stand up and do what he had to do. True pacifism is manly. In fact, it's the finest form of manliness. But if a man comes up to you and cuts your hand off, you don't offer him your other hand. Not if you want to go out and play the piano, you don't. I'm not saying that violence is what makes a man a man. I'm saying when violence comes, you can't run from it. You have to recognize its true nature in yourself as well as in others and stand up to it. If you run, you're dead, or you ought to be. Brilliant words from Mr. Peckinpah and brilliant writing from before from Mr. David Weddle. I truly am enjoying this book so much. And man, there's just so many other books I have to get to right now. It's like films, what I'm talking about before. You're never going to get to them all. In my other room, in the film room, I have a stack of books I haven't even touched yet. It's been wild as hell, man. But I would rather have far, far too much to read than nothing to read at all. I'd never want to be in a situation where I finish a book and I don't have another book ready to go, man. That's just insanity, man. It's like, hey, you know what? If you're going to get a burger, man, you want to get fries with that. Because what happens if you finish your burger and you're still hungry? What are you going to do? Order another burger, man? You got to wait. You're still hungry. You're like, gosh, man, I'm still waiting for this other burger. But no, man, you got those fries there. You eat the fries. And then if you're still hungry there, well, then I guess you order some more, man. Yeah, no, but just great stuff. I was happy to see that on Mellowscene.com, which is Vinegar Syndrome's side website for their strictly adult titles. I wasn't even aware this book existed, but you better believe I'm going to be on this like white on rice. It's the book Halstead Plays Himself, which is a biography on Fred Halstead, who was a famous, well, I would say a notable experimental gay porn film director from the 1970s. I talked about some of his work back a long time ago. I talked about his films, L.A. Plays Itself and Sex Tool. And I talked about that with some other films like Forbidden Letters and Passing Strangers. I can actually find what episode that was if you're curious to listen to that. That was one of the Valentine's Day ones. If the thumbnails will load, I can tell you all about it. I talked about that just earlier this year on episode number 46, if you want to give that a listen, if you're curious. But he's a fascinating guy, man. He had his work is very interesting, man. It's aggressive, but it's tender. It's daring, but it's also got this level of warmth that is hard to explain. I'm not going to get too much into it because time is not on my side for this. But he had a very tragic ending, but a notable figure in adult cinema nonetheless. So this book will be picked up and it will be read just as soon as I can get through the other stack of books. But I have less than a minute left. Thank you for listening. Whether this is your first time or yet again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I will be back this week or next week, one of the days. Use your time wisely. Make sure you're spending every second of every day doing what you want to do and pursuing your goals, your hopes, your dreams, because no one else is going to do it for you. That's all I got, man. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back next time.